Hello everybody, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we have another tier list, and of course it is specifically a Percy Jackson tier list. The last tier list I did was me ranking all of the characters in The Lost Hero, and then I think before that I ranked the characters in season 1 of Percy Jackson based on their show counterparts, and then I've ranked like the scenes in Sea of Monsters. But today I am tackling a full book character Percy Jackson tier list. Now, if you are new here and you are unaware, I am currently in the process of reading the Heroes of Olympus series for the first time. I am on Son of Neptune. You can check out my reading vlogs as I read the series. Because I am still in the process of reading Heroes of Olympus, these characters that we are talking about in this tier list today, I'm only going to be judging them based on the 5 original Percy Jackson Olympian series books. These 5 books behind me, I am only judging their characters based on what they do in these books. Like, for example, Hera is a much bigger character in The Lost Hero than she is in any of these 5 books. And I know that because I've read The Lost Hero. But when I rank Hera in this tier list, I will be ranking her based on her in just the 5 books. And that applies to every single character. Now, I know the title of this video probably says something along the lines of tier ranking every single Percy Jackson character. I am here to tell you right now that that is a lie, because first of all, getting a list of every Percy Jackson character ever is kind of difficult. Second of all, I didn't include any monsters because I feel like that could be a whole separate tier list. The characters that I've included in this list are mostly just main characters that show up a handful of times. They show up in more than one book. They have an important effect on the books in general, or just characters that I know I remember off the top of my head. So if I forgot a character, if I forgot some niche camper that we talk about twice, that doesn't really do anything, I am so sorry. This is the best we've got for today. Plus, if I did every single character, guys, we'd be here for 2 hours, and I don't want to do that. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into this tier list. Normally, I do very fun tier names for my tier list. Today, I'm keeping it nice and simple with S tier, which is our top tier, then A, B, C, and D. Mostly because outside of maybe 3 of these characters that I've included, most of these characters are pretty good people. They're pretty good characters. I didn't want to put any of them in a tier called Tartarus or anything like that. So the tier list names are very simple, very straightforward today. So without further ado, I say let's get into it. The first character that we have is Apollo. I'm pretty sure we meet Apollo in Titan's Curse. He's, kind of a run-of-the-mill god, in my opinion at least. He's self-centered, he's arrogant, at least that's how he's described, but we do see him help the trio. I think he breaks the law, I'm pretty sure, to help them get on a train or something like that, because they're gonna go and save Artemis, his sister. Also, I am pretty sure that he votes against Percy being disintegrated, so at least he has that going for him. He's pretty helpful in The Last Olympian. I think he heals Annabeth, and I think he heals Chiron. So he's good enough. You know what I mean? The bar is already very low for gods and what we have to deal with. So it doesn't take a lot to exceed expectations. I kind of want to put Apollo in B tier. Just because we're starting off with him, I feel like he is a very run-of-the-mill, middle area character for these books. I don't want to get, too ahead of myself. So I think B tier is a good place for him to be. I'm okay with that. Next, we have another god. We have Ares. He is anger issues personified times 10. He's low-key, kind of sadistic. He's just not the best or the nicest. I do think Ares cares about his children. But I think he has a really weird way of showing it. And he is in a relationship with Aphrodite, kind of. I don't know, she has affairs. However, Ares helped Luke steal the lightning bolt. I'm pretty sure he cursed Percy at one point. And to be quite honest, looking at him from the Lightning Thief to The Last Olympian, he doesn't really have any character development. He doesn't improve as a character. He still is a shitty person, a shitty god, a shitty father by the end of it all. You know what I mean? So because of that, I think I'm gonna put him C tier. I feel like that's a decent place to put him. He's not necessarily like the worst character ever to exist. There's definitely some worse characters, I think, in this list. But he's definitely not like in the better half of the gods, if you ask me. The random order that this tier list put characters at, they put a lot of gods at the front because the next person we have is Artemis. Now, I actually very much adore Artemis. You know, she's very calm, she's very reasonable, we rarely see her angry. Anger issues is like the number one thing that the gods struggle with. But I feel like every time we see her, she's relatively calm and nice and reasonable. She also loves women, and we have to love a girl who supports other girls. And I think out of all the gods and goddesses, she is definitely one of the more sympathetic ones. Like, she offers to hold the sky up for Annabeth, which I don't think a lot of other gods or goddesses would have done, honestly. And like Apollo, she also voted against Percy being disintegrated. So, honestly, my instinct is to put her in A tier, honestly. And I feel like that's gonna be kind of crazy because I think there's just a lot of Percy Jackson characters that are going to end up in S and A tier because, I mean, Percy Jackson is just such a good like book series and obviously it's gonna have phenomenal characters. But if I'm looking at all of the gods and like which one, if I had to pick and ask a certain god to be on my side, I'd probably pick Artemis. Like, I feel as though I'd have the best chance with her. She's the most understanding, the most reasonable, definitely the nicest. So I'm going to put her in A tier. I'm pretty confident in that one. Next, we have Bianca D'Angelo. And Bianca is an interesting character. We don't have her for very long, but she does have like a residual effect in the rest of the books because of Nico. So she is a good older sister to Nico. But when she joins the Hunters, she literally says she did it so that she doesn't have to be Nico's babysitter anymore, which I have always thought is a batshit crazy thing to say when your brother is 10. Like, I'd get it if your brother is like 14, 15, and you're like, oh, I don't want to babysit him anymore. Like, I'm 18. I'm too grown for that. Like, I don't want to babysit him anymore. It's not my problem. But your brother's 10. Your brother is 10. That's a baby. That's a child. So that always gave me weird vibes. However, on the other side of that coin, she does become a whole lot more confident after she joins the Hunters. Like, she just becomes more confident in herself, which I guess is nice to see. Like, it's nice to see that in a character. She does annoy me by taking something from the junkyard of the gods, especially after they were told specifically not to do that. But then she does make up for it by being the one to, like, face Talos, I think his name is, and, like, not letting Percy do it. And unfortunately, that is how she dies. And so Bianca dies, and it is very sad, but to me personally, I find her death to be sad mostly for Nico, not because I'm sad that she died, if that makes any sense. So because of this, I don't know if people are like really die-hard riders for Bianca, and I hope this doesn't upset anybody, but I am putting her in B tier. She's gonna be above Apollo, but like, yes, she does some good things. Yes, she makes up for like a lot of the bad things that she does. And then she does unfortunately die. So like the errors that her character makes, she does make up for. I just think maybe if I had her for longer as a character, maybe we could get her up into A tier, but I think I'm happy putting her at B tier. I think, you know, B tier is like a happy place to be. B tier is you're a good character, you're run of the mill, you're middle of the area, you're not phenomenal and you're not bad. You know what I mean? So B is not an insult. B is a good tier to be at. The next character we have is Calypso. I find Calypso to be a very interesting character. And I kind of wish we got to see more of her, honestly. I think the curse that she has makes her very complex and makes her very interesting. But similar to Bianca in a way, her time in the like Olympian series is limited. I do think I will see more of her in the Heroes of Olympus series. Obviously, no spoilers in the comments. I just feel like I see people talk about her a lot, so I think she has to show up again at some point. But just based off of the original 5 Percy Jackson books, she's fun, she's interesting, but her time is limited. I do think she does a lot for the relationship of Percabeth. Now, whether or not what she does is good or bad, I think is up to the eye of the beholder. But whatever that might be, she does do something for their relationship, which does make it interesting. So I think she is also going to go into B tier, but she's probably going to be at the end of it. I don't know. I could like interchange her and Apollo, honestly. I think Apollo is going to be ahead of Calypso just because he does do a lot in the Battle of Manhattan. So that's why he's above her. But I do find her super interesting. And like I just said with Bianca, B tier is not a bad place to be. Whether you're at the top of B tier or you're at the bottom of B tier. B tier is like nice, happy, right in the middle. You know what I mean? Next, we have Charles Beckendorf. If you follow my channel at all, if you pay attention to any of my videos, you probably know that I am personally a very big fan of Children of Hephaestus. I don't know, I just have a soft spot for them, and it's just a thing. I don't know what it is. It's just how I am. So I do really like Charles. He's a very kind boy. He's a very shy boy, and I find that very endearing. He also has a soft spot for Tyson, which, not to spoil the tier list, I adore Tyson. And his death is super, super sad to me because of his death. Because like I said with Bianca, like her death is sad to me, but I'm sad about her death because of Nico and Nico's reactions and how it's going to affect Nico. I'm just sad about Charles's death in general, point blank, period. And then when he dies, Percy describes him as like the anchor of the camp, which I think is beautiful. So I personally very much like Charles, and I do hope we see a lot more of him in the TV show. He has yet to be cast in season 2 of Percy Jackson, but fingers crossed he does get cast and they use his character a lot more than the book does. I think I'm gonna put him, you guys can call me crazy, I'm putting him in A tier. Now the question is he above or below Artemis? I'm gonna put him above. You guys can call me crazy, I don't care. I have a soft spot for Children of Hephaestus, what can I say? Next, we have Chiron. Chiron is like the activities director at camp, and he's also like a father to more than half of the Camp Half-Blood campers. He's very much a voice of reason amongst all the demigods throughout all of the books. He is very patient with everyone, which is very important, honestly, because a lot of the demigods can be very annoying. He is also maybe like the only smart centaur to exist at all in these book series. And also I do kind of like how he's always had like hope and faith in Percy since the very beginning, like all the way back when they were at Yancey. So Chiron is a very important character. He does a lot for the group. He does a lot in Sea of Monsters, and he does a lot in like The Last Olympian. Like he is very helpful. He's very much a voice of reason. Guys, I think we have our very first S tier character. I don't think that's crazy either. I think Chiron is so very important to the entire book series. So I don't think putting him in S tier is crazy at all. I'm very confident with that. Next, we have Chris Rodriguez. He is the only character in this tier list that like doesn't have official art on Wiki Riordan. I don't know why, but so I found fan art on. So Chris Rodriguez is definitely an interesting character. He sides with Luke, and then he like goes crazy in the labyrinth, and then Clarice rescues him, right? And then after Clarice rescues him, and I think Dionysus helps get his mind back on track or something, when we get to the last book, like he's trying to convince Clarice to come fight in the Battle of Manhattan, so he does that, which is really nice. He's definitely not like the most used camper in the book. I mean, obviously he doesn't even have his own character art on Wiki Riordan, but I do feel like the show is definitely going to be utilizing him more, honestly, especially because they recast the actor. So like if they felt like they needed to recast the actor, then I definitely think they're going to be using the character a lot more than the books do. My only issue with Chris Rodriguez is that I kind of ship Clarice and Selena, to be quite honest with you, and he does get in the way of that. So because of that, I'm gonna put him in B tier. He's still going below Apollo because I just feel like Apollo does a little bit more helpful things than Chris does. And Chris at one point was on the bad side, okay? He's not a perfect character. He's got issues, all right? So he's gonna go B tier. I think that's a decent place to put him. And speaking of, next character that we have is Clarice. This official art of Clarice is so unserious, by the way, it's crazy. So Clarice is another character that I think is actually a pretty complex character, and I feel like she's a little overlooked when people assess Percy Jackson characters. And I think she's easy to overlook because, she starts off as a bully. She is pretty much mean throughout the entire books, but the way that she is mean and the reasons why she's mean definitely change throughout the books. Like, she starts off as just a straight up bully, but as we get to know her more, we realize that she's really just defensive of her cabin. And unfortunately, a lot of times that is her downfall as a character. But in my humble opinion, I always feel like it's a fun time when a character's pride is their Achilles heel. No pun intended, by the way. I just think a character's biggest downfall being their pride can be such an interesting character trait. And if written correctly, if used correctly, like, you can make a very fascinating and interesting and complex character with that. And to be honest with you, I think the show is going to use that side of Clarice way, way more than the books do and make her a far more interesting and far more complex character by really honing in on pride being one of her main downfalls, right? And speaking of her pride, we do see her pride take over for her in The Last Olympian, which is very unfortunate, right? Because it's like a whole ordeal. You guys know, you've read the books. But she does eventually come to her senses in the end. It's just not soon enough, which sucks. I like Clarice, and like I just said, I do think she is a very underrated and overlooked character, quite honestly. However, I don't think she's A tier. I think that if I were to do this tier list by the end of the entire TV show series, I do think Clarice has the potential to be an A tier character, maybe even S tier, depending on where the writers of the show take her. But right now, I'm thinking she's B tier. My only question is she above or below Bianca? It's hard to say because, like, we obviously know Clarice for way longer. We know her in all 5 books. So we get to see more from her, and we get to see her develop more as a character. But it's easy to want to put Bianca above her because Bianca's nice. Bianca's nice when we meet her, and she's nice when she dies. Clarice, however, is mean throughout the books, and she's got a lot of issues, and, like, her pride makes her not the nicest person. And sometimes it's hard to, like, see a character beyond the way they treat other people, if that makes any sense. So I'm struggling. I'm struggling to figure out where I want to put the two of them. I think I'm okay with this for right now. No, actually, we're going to put her above Bianca. And I really think that's only just because I get to see Clarice for more books, so I just get more from her. It's like a close race, though. They could be neck and neck, you know what I mean? Next, we've got the Stoll brothers. I combined the two of them because they're basically the same person. They're twins. They've got a lot in common. They're both, like, mischievous. They pickpocket. You can't really tell the difference between them, to be quite honest with you. I think Connor is, like, a little bit smarter. But other than that, they're pretty much the same person. What I can really remember about their characters is that they don't like Clarice and they like Percy, which makes them pretty decent characters in my book. But there's not enough of them for me to really care about them that much. Would it be crazy if I put them in C tier? Just because, like, okay, for example, the bottom person in B tier is Calypso, right? And she is in B tier because even though I don't see a lot of her, I find her very fascinating. For the Stoll brothers, I don't know if I find them fascinating. They're just kind of funny, little quirky little camper boys. And they're just kind of there for fun. And that's about it. So I think I'm going to put them in C tier. And I'm so sorry to anybody if that makes you really upset. But like I say in all my tier list videos, this is objective. It's a tier list, okay? Don't get mad. If you want to make your own tier list, please, by all means, do that. You know what I mean? This is just how I feel. And also, it's kind of just based on what I remember, because I haven't reread the last 3 books of this book series in maybe a year and a half, 2 years. So it's been a while, okay? This is just based off what I can remember right now. Next, we have Daedalus / Quintus. So we meet Quintus in the Battle of the Labyrinth, and then later on it's revealed that Quintus is actually Daedalus. And so he gets negative points because he did help Luke's army navigate the labyrinth. And he helped Luke also he could, like, get his son and his nephew back. However, he does come back during the Battle of Camp Half-Blood, and he does help Camp survive. he brings like backup. And then in the end, he gives Annabeth his laptop, which definitely has like residual effects as the books continue on. And then he gives Mrs. O'Leary to Percy, I'm pretty sure. And then he dies. He is another character that he's definitely interesting. I think the best thing that he does is give Annabeth his laptop. The effects of Annabeth having that laptop are like probably the most important thing that his character does. So that being said, where do I put him? Great question. I think I'm gonna put him right smack dab in the middle of C tier, right? He does some stuff that sucks. He literally helps Luke get into camp. But then he kind of makes up for it. He helps camp survive. I'll allow it C tier, right? Next is Dionysus. And Dionysus is definitely a doozy of a character, if you ask me. So he's grumpy and he sucks. He never remembers anybody's names, right? And then he kind of has like a small turnaround in the Titan's Curse, but then not really. Like he kind of has a turnaround halfway through the book, and then by the end of the book, he is back to his very annoying, very grumpy self. The only time we ever really see him show emotion for like the campers is when Castor dies. Castor is one of his sons, I'm pretty sure. So he gets really sad when that happens. He does heal Chris Rodriguez, so he did that at least. And overall, in the end, he's not that bad. But he does suck for a lot of the books. So I think, quite honestly, we're gonna put him, I think maybe right above Daedalus. I think that's a good place for him to be. Like, he's grumpy and he sucks. He does some good things, I guess. But it's like, you know, he's just him. I'm actually going to rearrange the order real quick because I feel like if before I talk about Ethan, I have to talk about Selena for it to make sense. So don't mind me rigging the system real quick. Next, I want to talk about Selena, right? So overall, she's a pretty nice girl. She kind of gets caught up in some bad stuff with Luke. Like, I think she ends up being a spy for Luke because she kind of has a crush on him. And then she doesn't have a crush on him anymore. And he's like, well, actually, guess what? I'm going to blackmail you anyways. So even though you want to not be my spy, you're going to still be my spy. But I think she does really make up for everything with her bravery at the end of The Last Olympian. Her death is easily one of, if not the saddest in the entire book series, if you ask me. Especially when you look at it from my perspective, where I do kind of like the notion of Clarice and Selena together. Like, Clarice being so sad over Selena's death is just, it's sad, you guys. And quite honestly, she's a character that I wish we saw more of in the books because I feel like she has the potential to be very interesting and very complex with her whole being a spy aspect, but she was actually being blackmailed, you know what I mean? So kind of similar to Charles, I hope the show does cast Selena, because as of right now, Selena is not casted in Percy Jackson Season 2. I hope the show casts her and does a lot more with her than the books did. Y'all can call me crazy. I'm putting her up in A tier. Sorry. When a character death in a book can actually make me cry, like not just, aw, that's so sad, but when it can actually make tears fall down my face, they're a good character. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I know she does some crappy things, and what I'm about to say about Ethan probably is going to make me a hypocrite, unfortunately, but Selena, A tier. Now let's talk about Ethan Nakamura. Ethan is another camper that is on Luke's side in this army, right? Then Percy defeats him in a fight and spares his life, right? And even after Percy spares his life and gives Ethan an out from this whole Kronos situation, Ethan still decides to side with Kronos. He doubles down and does not take that second chance and sides with Kronos again. Fast forward to The Last Olympian, Ethan becomes one of Percy's biggest ops, truly. However, in the end, of course, like most characters in this book series, Ethan turns himself around, he strikes at Kronos to save Percy's life, and when he's dying, he tells Percy that, like, the minor gods deserve respect and that they deserve thrones, which is, like, the major point of the entire last book, if not the entire series, right? And at the end of it all, Percy makes a shroud for Ethan, deciding to remember him for his good deeds and not his bad ones. But I am not Percy Jackson. I do remember Ethan for his bad deeds, okay? Yeah, I remember his good ones too, but I also remember his bad ones. And is that hypocritical for me to defend Selena, but not Ethan? Maybe. Maybe it is, okay? But also, although Ethan was fighting for a good point, right? And you can say this about Luke as well. You can say this about everybody on Luke's side. Yes, Ethan's point that he was fighting for with the minor gods is a good point. It's a good reason. What Luke is fighting for is not necessarily wrong, but it's all about the way in which they do it. It's not necessarily their point, it's their methods that make them the bad guys, that make them the bad characters, right? Selena was blackmailed into being a spy. Yes, at first she wasn't, but I feel bad for her for getting mixed up with Luke because she had a crush on him. I feel bad for her for that. Ethan sided with Luke, got a second chance, doubled down, and sided with Luke again, and made it worse. He was even more involved the second time around than he was to begin with. So, like, the difference to me between Selena and Ethan is that Selena wanted out, and she couldn't find a way out because she was being blackmailed. Ethan had a way out. He was gifted a way out on a silver platter and didn't take it. So it's hard for me to feel bad for him that he died. I'm sorry if that makes me sound like a crazy woman. And I know a lot of people really like Ethan. I know Ethan is very much liked in the fandom. I see a lot of tweets and stuff where people are always like, Ethan Nakamura, they could never make me hate you. And I don't hate him. I don't hate Ethan. I understand what he was fighting for. His point was incredibly valid. However, he was still on the bad side. And he had the choice to not be there. And he said, actually, I'm good. I'm staying over here. So my pity for him is a little bit less than it would be with other people. That being said. Oh, it's probably going to annoy people. I'm putting him in C tier. I'm sorry. Fight me if you must. Okay? I think it's just hard for me personally to get over the fact that he was given an out and didn't take it. So, like, I don't feel bad for him. He could have fought on the right side of things. He could have joined Percy's side. And when they won, he could have been like, hey, here's what we should do now that we've won. Now that we've saved the gods, we should make this point to them and tell them that minor gods matter and they need to do all these things. Like, minor gods deserve thrones, like they deserve to be respected. Like, now that we've won Percy, and now that I've helped you win Percy, let's do this together and tell the gods this. He could have done that, but no, he had to be on the bad side all the way up until the end. All the way up until the end. And then at the end, oh, just kidding. Actually, I want to change sides and be on the good side. Percy, look out. Ugh. And then he doesn't even take a hit for Percy. When he hits Kronos, I think his sword like shatters and it ricochets back and like gets him in the stomach, and that's why he dies. So like, yeah, I respect your sacrifice at the end of it all, but like, too little too late. And I know that that's very hypocritical because the exact same thing can be said for Selena. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to explain it. And I'm sorry if that upsets anybody. I'm so sorry. Anyways, moving on. Next, we have Gabe Ugliano. Not much to say here. He's sloppy, he's lame, he's a loser, he's a bully, D tier. Bad character, boo. Next, we have our first of our main trio in this tier list, Grover Underwood. Baby boy Grover. Kind of the best satyr to ever exist, if I'm being quite honest with you. He has managed to help demigods like Thalia, Luke, Nico, Bianca, Percy, Annabeth, all of those powerful, incredible, phenomenal demigods. Grover is the one that helped them find their way to camp. Or Grover, like, helped find them out in the wild, or whatever. Now, granted, yeah, Thalia got turned into a tree. But on that one, he was 2 out of 3. So, there's that, okay? Overall, Grover's just a good dude. Not to mention, he finds Pan, which is very impressive. Like I said, kind of the best satyr to ever exist. I think it's a no-brainer. He goes into S tier, which is crazy because I think the show is developing Grover way better than the books do. Because although I love Grover, he can also be very annoying, especially in the first couple books, if I remember correctly. He's just like a big ball of anxiety, and it kind of annoys me sometimes when I read. And I think the show is doing Grover much better than the books do. So if Grover in the books is already an S tier character, TV show Grover, I love you so deeply. Anyways, moving on. Next, we have Hades. So Hades as a god, he's very independent, he's very bitter. He can be relatively calm, but he's also very terrifying, like if he gets super angry, right? Because like we've mentioned, all of the gods kind of have anger issues. I think one of the worst things he's done as a character was sending all of those monsters to kill Thalia when he found out about her. And I don't necessarily think him reacting to finding out that Zeus broke the pact of the big three, I think his anger was valid, but I think his actions were a bit over the top and a bit dramatic, right? And even though Hades is kind of crazy, he tends to be, I feel like, a fairly honorable god, especially compared to the other ones. He tends to be kind of reasonable. I don't know. He's like 50-50. Like, he does sort of stand by his word. Like, for example, in The Lightning Thief, he sends Sally back when Percy finishes doing whatever Percy's got to do in that book, right? He definitely becomes a lot less bitter by The Last Olympian, so he has some character growth and character development, which is more than can be said for Ares, right? Because right now Ares is like the bar, the lowest bar for gods on this tier list. And actually the worst part of Hades' character is probably how awful he is to Nico. But then again, that also changes by The Last Olympian. So, to me, I think Hades is definitely one of the more complex gods, right? Because like I said, like, he's independent, but he's very bitter and, like, cynical. But at the same time, he somehow manages to, like, stand by his word. Like I mentioned the thing with Sally, he's the only god that doesn't break the pact of the big three. I'm pretty sure he he deeply loved Bianca, Nico's mom. I felt bad for him when she died. I think Hades is definitely very complex. And maybe it's because I enjoy Nico so much as a character. Nico being a character that I like might help my opinion of Hades and might help my interest and my fascination with the character of Hades. But I'm thinking... Is that crazy? Maybe. Oh, and I feel like I should mention, when I look at the gods, right, I am looking at their actions in the books. I'm not necessarily considering any of, like, the actual stuff that they have done within Greek mythology. So, like, all of the stuff of Hades and Persephone, like, that's not necessarily in the books. That's just actual Greek mythology. So I'm not really looking at that. When we get to Poseidon, I'm looking at Poseidon in the book series. I'm not necessarily looking at, like, the actual history behind, like, Poseidon and Medusa and stuff like that. So I feel like I should preface that since I did just put Hades in A tier. Speaking of kind of the cynical and independent and outcasted gods, next we have Hephaestus. Like I just said, he is a little cynical, he is a little pessimistic, but he does kind of have every right to be so. He only really appears to a significant extent in the Battle of the Labyrinth. As you know, if you have seen the TV show, we've already seen Hephaestus in season 1, so I definitely think that they are going to utilize him as a character way more. I think the show is going to be utilizing the gods far, far, far more than the books do, which makes me very excited because I do think all of the gods are so interesting and so very complex. Like the way that Rick writes their characters, I think if you really take a deep dive to it, they can be so fascinating. Every single one of them, except maybe Ares. But as for Hephaestus, when it comes to strictly the books, he's not really there all that much, except for Battle of the Labyrinth, right? Similarly to how I feel about Hera, who, ironically enough, is next in this lineup, I get more from both of these characters in just The Lost Hero than I feel like I do in this entire 5-book series. But because we are only judging based on these 5 books, I don't really get that much from Hephaestus in these books. I really have to block out the fact that Leo is his son right now, because if you guys didn't watch my Lost Hero reading vlog, which you absolutely should, because I think I'm pretty funny and I think my reading vlogs are very funny and I do work very hard on them. They're like very long YouTube videos and they take a lot of time to get done, and I'm always very proud of them, and I just think it's a fun type of video. So if you haven't watched it, go watch my reading vlog and stay tuned for my Son of Neptune reading vlog. But I digress. If you haven't watched that, or if you've forgotten, I adore Leo. Leo became my favorite character very, very quickly in reading The Lost Hero. And as I am reading Son of Neptune, I miss Leo deeply, deeply I miss Leo. So I have to put aside the fact that Leo is his son right now, because that does give me a lot of bias towards him. So when it comes to Hephaestus, he's not in any of the highest tiers, to be quite honest with you. But I do think, like I mentioned, I have a soft spot for children of Hephaestus. That applies to Leo, that applies to Charles, that applies to Tyson, kind of. I know Tyson's a child of Poseidon, technically, but Hephaestus does take in Tyson and other Cyclopses. So I like him because of that. I think I'm going to put him right here in the middle of B tier. He only goes below Apollo because I think Apollo physically does more, especially by the end of the book. We just like see Apollo doing more. But if you were to ask me based on all Percy Jackson related things, so like this book series, what I've read so far of Heroes of Olympus, and the TV show, Hephaestus is like one of my favorite gods. But for right now, just based on these 5 books, he's going to be right here in the middle of B tier. And I feel like that's a pretty decent place to put him. Next, we have Hera. Hera is a character that before I read The Lost Hero, I didn't really know much about her. And now I feel like I know a little too much about her. But in just these 5 books, she does do a lot to help the trio in the Battle of the Labyrinth. She also does vote against Percy being disintegrated in Titan's Curse. She, I think, is definitely one of the more sympathetic gods, or like can portray herself as one of the more sympathetic gods, but she does have the accusation made a lot throughout these books that she makes herself seem sympathetic, but realistically she only cares about having a perfect family, and we know this because of how she's treated Hephaestus and how she treats Nico. So while Hera, I think, can be a sympathetic god, I think that sympathy comes with contingencies. Is that the right word? I don't even know. So she can be nice, but her niceness is very flawed in a way, right? And besides all of that, she's really not used in this book series a lot, like if at all, like she's barely used. So because this is just based off of the original 5 Percy Jackson books, not Heroes of Olympus or anything like that, I think her character is honestly like down here, dude. And I know that's gonna sound crazy, but like, I mean, think about it. Any sympathy that Hera has, it is conditional, right? Like, if you had a disability, hypothetically, she probably wouldn't help you, dog, which sucks. She doesn't do too much for the trio. Like, she is below Dionysus because, in my opinion, I do think Dionysus does a little bit more, and he doesn't do much at all. So that's kind of saying something. And it's not Hera's fault. They don't really use her a lot in these books. So that's why she's all the way down there. Next, we have Hermes. And let me talk to y'all about how I feel about Hermes. I think Hermes is one of the more, if not the most, complex of the gods, to be quite honest with you. I feel like he's normally pretty helpful. He's definitely pretty sympathetic to them, I feel like. He's not super arrogant like a lot of the gods in these lower tiers tend to be. And some of the gods that we haven't even gotten to yet. I don't think Hermes really displays a lot of arrogance, which is huge because I think the 2 biggest flaws with a lot of the gods is they have anger issues and they are very arrogant, right? I think Hermes cares a lot for his kids, especially Luke, obviously. But not only does Hermes care for his kids, he does kind of have, like I said, a very sympathetic view for all the demigods because he allows the unclaimed demigods to reside in his cabin. And so I think that definitely says something. Once again, considering how low the bar is for a god to be decent, Hermes is a pretty decent god, right? I think he is very interesting and very complex, and I find his relationship with Luke to be very fascinating, and I find his relationship with Luke's mom to be so very intriguing. I really like Hermes. I really, really do. And I already find him very fascinating in the books, and I think the show is going to double down, go 10 times harder on him as a character and make him all that much more interesting, just based on what I've seen in season 1, to be quite honest with you. So you guys can call me crazy. I feel like this tier list is going to make people hate me. Guys, these are just the vibes I'm feeling right now, okay? If I did this tier list again in a year, these characters could be in all kinds of different places, okay? I just think Hermes is interesting. And I do think I, as a person, do kind of gravitate towards the gods in these Percy Jackson books, which I think is a very interesting and maybe kind of different take. I feel like normally a lot of people, we gravitate towards the demigods because that's what we're supposed to do. But I find the gods so interesting. I think obviously Greek mythology within itself is super fascinating, but there's something about the way that Rick adds to the gods as characters and makes them a little bit more human. I find it so fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why I have enjoyed the show so much so far. And one of the things I liked the most about season 1, how much more the gods were involved, involving Hermes in season 1, involving Hephaestus in season 1, and getting to see more human characteristics from these gods. I love it. I am very drawn to the gods as characters, and that is just a personal thing. So if you think it's crazy that I've got Hermes and Hades and Artemis in A tier, I understand why you probably find that crazy, okay? Maybe not Artemis, but I could understand you finding Hermes and Hades being that high very crazy. But I think the best way I can explain it to you is that I just find the gods very fascinating. And sometimes I find them more fascinating than the demigods. Anyways, moving on. Next, we have Hestia. She is the only minor god that I included in this tier list because I feel like she's kind of the most notable one, I guess, in this book series. So, in my opinion, Hestia is like a major driving force in The Last Olympian, right? She says one of my favorite lines in the entire book series to Percy, where she tells Percy in order to understand his enemies, he must first understand their past. I love that line. I love that line so much. Hestia also plays a big part in helping Rachel understand her job as the Oracle. And although Hestia is not seen much at all in the entire series, I think she's like very briefly seen in The Lightning Thief, but like she's not mentioned by name. She's kind of just like a figure standing near a fire. And then we don't really see her again until The Last Olympian. She does play a very crucial part in the finale of this entire series. In the culmination of these 5 books, she has a major hand on a lot of the important things that happen. So I like her, and I find her very interesting. And to be quite honest with you, I'm gonna put her at the top of B tier. Sorry. Okay, and here, let me try and explain this, because people are probably gonna think I'm crazy. One of the things that Hestia does is she gives us like the whole flashback and like revelation with May and like Hermes visiting May and all that stuff. And I find everything involving Luke and Hermes and May to be so very much beyond fascinating. So the fact that she has a hand in that makes her very interesting to me. And like I just said, she does say one of my favorite lines in like the entire book series. So that definitely counts for something. I don't know. She's just got good vibes, okay? I'm going based on vibes and I like her vibes. So she gets to be at the top of B tier, okay? And that's how we're gonna go. That's how we're gonna do this tier list, all right? Moving on, we have Juniper. Juniper is definitely a much lesser character that we really don't see a lot of at all. She cares a lot about Grover. I know that much. But other than that, she's not very much super important. And she's not necessarily the most interesting character. So she's at this point in the C tier because just below her is Ares. And Ares just sucks. Ares could honestly arguably go into D tier. Should I move him? I might just, actually, now that I think about it. My tier list, I can do what I want. The only reason she's at the bottom of tier list, oh, well, actually, I'm gonna move some people around, okay? Okay. Juniper is where she is in C tier because everyone above her, I feel like, does something more important for the series, even though I feel like their roles are limited. So like Ethan's whole standpoint and what he dies for, I think is important. Dionysus, he does kind of suck the entire time, but he does do a couple decent acts here and there, so I'll give him that much. Hera, she does some decent things here and there, but she's not really used all that much in the books. Daedalus, he kind of sucks, but in the end, he does give Annabeth his laptop, and he helps save Camp Half-Blood, and I think that those are 2 very important things. And then you've got the Stolt brothers and Juniper, who are kind of just characters that are on this tier list, but they're really not involved in the books all that much. So like, where do you want me to put them? You know what I mean? That's why they're at the bottom of C tier. No, ill will towards them, no hatred towards them, no disliking towards them. I enjoy them both, all three of them as characters. But it's just like, hey, they don't really do anything. So, moving on, we have Luke Castellan, or however you want to say his last name. I feel like there's about 3 different ways you could pronounce his last name. But regardless, he is essentially the main antagonist of this entire series, right? But he is easily one of the more interestingly written characters in the entire series. And I think you guys can all agree with me on that. He is so complex in just the books alone, right? Me personally, I love when I'm given a character that I know I'm supposed to hate. I know I am not supposed to side with this character, and I know that this character is a bad person, but they do kind of have a point. Like, I love when a book or a show or a movie can give me an antagonist who is the bad dude, but I am thinking about them and their side and why they're doing the things they're doing. And Luke, I think, is such a phenomenal example of that type of character. Like I said earlier when talking about Ethan, what Luke is fighting for is not inherently incorrect. The gods do suck. Obviously, look at this tier list. We don't have a lot in the top, right? The gods are not the best. Everybody knows that. So his points are not necessarily wrong, but his issue lies within his methods. And that's the whole thing with his character, right? Like I said, his methods are wrong. And that's like the whole point of his character. And of course, like most people on Luke's side, by the very, very end, Luke does realize that like he was kind of in the wrong. Like his methods were kind of messed up. But I just find Luke to be so very fascinating and so very complex. And if I already think he's complex in the books, the show is gonna do so good with his character, you guys. Not to sound like I'm glazing the show in this entire tier list, but I can just tell. I can just tell the show is going to hone in on how complex Luke is, and the show is going to open up a whole new wave of Luke sympathizers. I can tell that just based on how they did Luke's betrayal in season 1. So, call me crazy, Luke goes right now at the top of S tier. Yes, he is above Grover. I am so sorry. I love Grover down bad. But in terms of character, in terms of like, oomph, you know what I mean? Luke is higher than Grover. And I don't think that's necessarily crazy to say. Next, we have Nico D'Angelo. Nico is a 10-year-old emo diva, and I love him. He has such an interesting arc of being very excited when he finds out that he's a demigod. And then he ultimately becomes like very jaded and like hates Percy because he blames Percy for Bianca's death. And it's very sad. He then becomes a very independent character, kind of like his father, Hades, when he finds out that he is a son of Hades, right? And then he becomes stronger as the books continue. His powers become crazier and crazier. The whole storyline that Nico has of him wanting to get Bianca back is a very compelling part of his character, in my opinion. I feel for him so bad when he's trying to get Bianca back from the underworld. It's very heartbreaking, especially when he finally accepts that Bianca is gone and Bianca has passed. I think Nico has sick powers, and he is a very big part of convincing Hades to help in the Battle of Manhattan, which is huge and helps them win. So in my humble opinion, I think Nico is goated. And not to have 2 S tier characters back to back, but he is right up there. Just a sliver, I think, below Luke. Just a sliver. Because I feel like Luke has a very whole, very circular arc, whereas we really only get Nico for about 3 books. And I do think Nico's character is going to be a lot more involved with the Heroes of Olympus series. But just based off of what we have of him in these 5 books, he's right up in S tier. Honestly, I don't think that that's crazy to say either. Next, we have Pan. This photo of Pan makes me chuckle. I think he looks very funny. So Pan, he's pretty interesting. He's a pretty good judge of character. He definitely emphasizes the power of empathy that satyrs have. He was really nice to Rachel when he met her. Didn't blame her for like her father's destruction of nature or whatever. He's really not that big of a character in the books, but he does play like a major role in Grover's personal journey. From what we see of him, he seems to be a decent person, but he's not really there that much. So guess what? C tier. The only reason that he is above these 2 characters is because of the role he plays for Grover's character. Next, we have Paul Blowfist. I adore how good Paul is for Sally. In my head, when I read the books, I do picture Paul Blowfist as Paul Rudd. I don't know if that's because they're both named Paul or what, but I like him. And I'm not sure if that's because I picture him as Paul Rudd or what, but I think Paul Blowfist is a pretty decent dude. He's not like the biggest, most important character in this series, but he is pretty chill and accepting when he finds out that Percy is a demigod, right? And he is kind of badass alongside Sally in the Battle of Manhattan, so I gotta give him points for that. I'm gonna put him right here, just below Ethan. See, I really like Paul, and he's below Ethan, so if anybody is typing out a comment to defend Ethan in my chat, hey, it's okay. I like Ethan. He's just not that high, okay? Next, we have Poseidon. Poseidon is definitely a very interesting character in my humble opinion. He is slightly more attentive to his children than most of the other gods are, but that might also be because he has significantly less kids that he has to deal with. He's kind of just a nice and chill and low-key dude. You know what I mean? Like, for example, when Percy and Annabeth get together, Athena has a major issue with Percy because of Athena and Poseidon's problems. But Poseidon doesn't really have anything against Annabeth. He's like, okay, cool. I like her. And like I reminded everybody with Hades, I'm not really taking any actual mythology into account. I'm really only taking into account the characterization that Rick gives to these characters. I am also trying to remove how much I adore Poseidon in the TV show because the way they did Poseidon in the TV show to me was incredible. 10 out of 10. I loved Poseidon. But overall, when it comes to the gods, Poseidon's definitely one of the better ones, honestly. He cares about his kids. He's helpful to his kids. I think I'm going to put him here. No, I lied. I'm going to put him here because he still has his flaws. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Next, we have Rachel Elizabeth Dare. And one thing about me is I have never understood the hatred for Rachel Elizabeth Dare. She is a huge help to the gang in the Battle of the Labyrinth. I think that she is a very interesting character and she adds a very interesting dynamic to the later books, which I feel like is important by the time she comes into the books, because the books definitely could have suffered a fate of feeling very repetitive as we get into Battle of the Labyrinth and Last Olympian. And I think that her being a character adds a very, very interesting dynamic to characters like Percy and Annabeth, and it helps with their slow burn, and I just think that she is great. Not to mention, she literally becomes like the Oracle, which is so cool. I love her. I think she's super cool. I'm putting her in A tier. I don't care. I don't care. Call me crazy. I'm happy with that placement. Moving on. We have Sally Jackson. Now, I have become very partial to Sally in the TV show for lots of reasons. A, I just adore her, and I think that they added so much to her character. They made her so much more badass in the show, and I just think she's great. Another reason I feel very partial to Sally Jackson in the TV show is because I think the number one comment I get on any social media platform whenever I post about Percy Jackson is that people say I look like Sally Jackson, which is a huge compliment to me. I think Virginia Cole is gorgeous, and it is very much a very nice compliment for people to ever say that I look like her or could be a young Sally Jackson, but regardless. Show Sally Jackson, adore her. Her and Poseidon, I love them deeply. So I do have to kind of separate that from the books when I'm doing this tier list, which is kind of hard for me. But looking at Sally Jackson in the books, I still think that she is a really great character. I think that she is a great mom to Percy, which is not always the easiest task. She's always doing what she can for her son, even when it's incredibly hard for her to do so. I do really enjoy her character, and like I said, her and Paul have a very badass moment in Battle of Manhattan. But again, like I said, I do think that the show is going to do a way better job with her character. I think I'm gonna put Sally right above Poseidon. Now, if we were taking the show into account, guys, I'm not going to lie to you, she might be up in S tier. I adore Sally Jackson. But she is in A tier just because, you know, she's a great mom. She does everything she can for her kid. She's not super utilized in the books, but I mean, she's definitely a better parent than Poseidon. Granted, Poseidon can't be a great parent. He's like not allowed to see Percy. So I think A tier is a pretty good place for Sally to be. Next, we have Tantalus. This one's pretty easy. He's mean, he's crazy, he's a loser, he's literally psycho. He likes watching campers get hurt. He deflects blame onto everybody else, and he ends up back in the underworld where he belongs. The question is he worse than Gabe? Honestly, probably, yeah. He is probably worse than Gabe, which I know is crazy. Anyways, next we have the one and only Thalia Grace. I adore Thalia. I think that she is badass. I think that she is strong. I think that she is so cool. She's a very brave demigod. She has a reputation of being a very brave demigod. Sometimes she has the same flaws as Zeus, especially when it comes to like her pride and her stubbornness. She can also definitely have a temper. Just like Zeus. But again, just like Zeus, she has tendencies to be like a really good leader. One of the things that I think makes Thalia super interesting is that sometimes she can be very emotional and she will tend to lead with her heart and not her head. And that is something that I can actually personally relate to a lot of times. I think her relationship with Luke makes her a 10 times more interesting character than she already is. And I think the show is going to dive into the relationship way more than it does in the books, and that makes me very, very excited. Long story short, I love Thalia down bad. I think I'm gonna put her up in S tier. I feel bad. I feel like I'm shoving Grover to the back. I don't mean to. I love Grover. He's still S tier. S tier is like the best. Come on. Next, we have Tyson. And I'm laughing because this is going to be another S tier character. Spoiler alert, I love Tyson. He is literally an angel and he can do no wrong in my eyes. He is smarter than he seems on the surface. He is just a sweetie pie. He is willing to sacrifice himself for his friends. I adore Tyson deeply. In my last reread of Sea of Monsters, which you can watch in my Sea of Monsters reading vlog, when we get to the end and we have the whole brotherly moment between Tyson and Percy, I cry like a baby. Tyson is literally the best boy. And if I was doing a super, super subjective tier list, he'd be at the top. But I'll probably put him here. I feel like that's about right. Next, and the last god that's on this tier list is Zeus. I've got my qualms with Zeus, okay? There's lots of narcissism going on with his character. He's very hypocritical. Extremely hypocritical, okay? Like, when he tries to kill Nico and Bianca, when he finds out that Hades had children, even though they were born before the pact of the big three. But then he goes and has Thalia. Not to mention also Jason. That's not included in these books, but still very hypocritical. And then he still threatens to kill Percy after Percy returns his lightning bolt to him and proves that he didn't steal in the first place. Zeus still threatens him and says, hey, by the way, if you ever fly, I'm gonna shoot you down out of the sky. He's very stubborn, he holds grudges, he never takes accountability for anything, he has anger issues, he has a very, very, very long list of flaws. I could keep going. And because of this long, long, long list of flaws, he has put Olympus in danger multiple times. And now that I think about it, I think I actually kind of hate Zeus. I think I actually kind of hate him a lot. Is that crazy? Honestly, I expected Zeus to maybe be a little bit higher. But when I really started thinking about it, not a lot of redeeming qualities about him. Like, does he care for his kid? Sure. But also his best form of defense for her was turning her into a tree? I don't know. I hate him. He has too many flaws and is too annoying and too dismissive of his own actions for me to even be willing to put him in any higher tier, to be quite honest with you. Zeus annoys me deeply in the books. Zeus annoys me in any adaptation, I feel like, of anything ever. But in the books, hate him. Next, we have Zoe Nightshade. She is a lieutenant for Artemis. Her and Thalia have a lot of beef for a lot of the Titan's Curse, which kind of made me not like Zoe at all when I first read that book, because I did really like Thalia, which kind of makes me not really like Zoe whenever I read that book, because I do really like Thalia, obviously, based on where Thalia is placed. She also didn't really vibe with Percy all that much because all of the hunters hate men. And I really like Percy. Obviously, he is the protagonist of this entire series. So that also kind of made me jaded towards Zoe for a little bit. But I think in the long run, Zoe did grow on me, especially in the end when she cries for Artemis and sacrifices herself for Artemis. I do really like that and I really respect that. So I think she's B tier. The question is, do I like her more or less than I like Bianca? I'll put her in B tier just because I feel like the arc of her character in Titan's Curse and the journey that her character goes on with me personally, I quite like, because even though I don't really like her at the beginning, I do end up very much liking her at the end. So she's going to be a little bit above Bianca. And of course, saving the best 2 characters for last, because duh. There's honestly not even much to say about these 2 characters because it's common sense where they're going to go. Annabeth Chase, badass character. One of the coolest female characters, I think, written in book history. Like, wait, okay, that was kind of an aggressive statement. Maybe like top 10, top 5 female characters in like children's young adult books. In my opinion, she's great. There's no denying that. She has a really cool development throughout the whole series. I find her character very fascinating. I relate to her on a personal level because I consider myself to be a child of Athena. So I see a lot of similarities between myself and Annabeth. Obviously, S tier. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Percy Jackson, the main protagonist of the entire series, the main dude. There's not even really anything to say or explain about this. He is obviously going to be top tier. He is obviously at the tip top of top tier. He's Percy freaking Jackson. And that concludes our Percy Jackson character tier list. I've been sitting here for like almost 2 hours. My back hurts. But real quick, let's go over the tier list now that it's all done. Looking at it in full, it's actually so fascinating that all of the tiers are pretty much even in number of characters except for the bottom tier. I think that really says something about Percy Jackson and like how great a lot of these characters really are. So okay, in the bottom tier, in D tier, we've got Tantalus at the very bottom. He's just straight up evil. We've got Gabe right next to him. They're pretty much tied. Gabe is like the mortal version of straight up evil. Then you have Ares. Ares, easily the worst god in my opinion. He has little to no character development throughout the 5 books. He's aggressive, he's mean, he's violent, he sucks. And right next to him, we've got Zeus. I don't like Zeus at all. And I think making this tier list really helped me realize that. I hate him. He sucks. He's the second worst god, arguably worse than Ares because Ares is just stupid. Like a lot of Ares' problems stem from the fact that he's just dumb. Oh my god, I just realized I didn't put Athena on here. Wait, that's so embarrassing. Okay, if Athena was in here, she'd probably be in B tier. She's not the best mom. Anyways, moving on. C tier, we've got Juniper. She's there. She's cool. She's fine. She doesn't do much. Stoll Brothers, same deal. They're there. They don't really do much. Pan doesn't really do much either. He is mostly a plot device for the character of Grover, but Pan's cool, I guess. Daedalus, he has an interesting arc as a character, and like I've said, he does things that have like residual effects, giving Annabeth his laptop, helping in the Battle of Camp Half-Blood. Then we've got Hera. She doesn't really do much either. She's not very used in this book series. She helps the trio a little bit in the 4th book, but other than that, she's really not there all that much. We've got Dionysus. He also kind of sucks throughout all 5 books. He's not very nice to the kids. He doesn't really care about them. He is rude and cynical. He cares about his own son. He does help Chris Rodriguez. He does have some good moments, right? Then we've got Paul Blofeld. Just a fun dude. Just a good guy. And you gotta love a good guy. Especially when he's being compared to Gabe, right? Then at the top of C tier, we have Ethan Nakamura. I know that's probably going to upset a lot of people. I know a lot of people do really like Ethan. And I am willing to admit to you guys right here that I am probably very hypocritical having him in C tier and Selena is up in A tier. But I've already explained my piece on that and why he is where he is. So I'm not going to rehash it. You guys know, you watched the video. Moving on up to B tier. At the bottom of B tier, I have Calypso, just because I find her character to be super interesting. She's not really there all that much, but I wish I got to see her more. And because I find her so interesting, find her so fascinating, and I want to see more of her, that's why she's in B tier instead of C tier. Then we've got Chris Rodriguez, another character who we don't have too much of. He's not the most utilized god. And the reason he's so low is because he does get in the way of my personal opinion and ship of Clarice and Selena. Then we've got Hephaestus, a god that I do love, I think, in my opinion. But in terms of these 5 books, he's not very much used at all. So that's why he's lower in B tier. Same with Apollo. He's not there too much. He does a couple of good things, especially towards the end in the Battle of Manhattan. But other than that, he's really not there. He's only really in like 2-3 books. Next, we have Bianca D'Angelo. This is probably another placement that's going to upset a lot of people. I'm not sure how much people ride for Bianca, but I feel like her being right smack dab in the middle of the entire tier list is a decent place for her to be. She's got a lot of flaws. Yes, she makes up for them, but I don't know. I've just never been able to get over her being like, I don't want to be Nico's babysitter anymore when her brother is 10 years old. I've just always felt like that was a lot. Even though, yeah, sure, she's been, his babysitter for 70 years? I don't care. I've never really been able to get over that. Right next to Bianca, we have Zoe Nightshade. Zoe Nightshade is a character I kind of find irritating, but then towards the end, I really like her. Then we have Clarice. Clarice, like I said, I think she's very underrated and very overlooked. I do think that she does have a tendency to be mean throughout the entire book, but like I said, I think the reason why she's mean and like the reasoning behind her defensive nature changes as we go from the Lightning Thief to the Last Olympian, and I do like seeing that type of character development. And then at the top of B tier, we have Hestia, just because of how pivotal of a role she plays in the last book, and I just find her to be very fascinating. Moving on up to A tier, at the bottom we have Hades, one of the more interesting gods in my opinion, and also one of the more kind of reasonable, kind of respectable gods in a way, but I kind of use those terms very loosely. Then we have Poseidon. If this was a show tier list, he would definitely be much higher, but you know, Poseidon's a decent enough god. He does what he can for Percy. He cares about Percy, but you know, he's a god, so he does still definitely have his flaws. Then we've got Sally Jackson, again, another character that I think would be higher if this was a show tier list, but it's not. It's a book tier list. I love Sally Jackson. I think she's cool. I think her best version of herself is probably in The Last Olympian, to be honest with you. Then we've got Artemis. I think Artemis is so cool. I think that she is one of the coolest gods, and I just adore her. I think that she's sick. I think that she is kind. I think that she's probably the best god, like in terms of being sympathetic and being helpful. Then we've got Charles Beckendorf. He doesn't really do a lot, to be quite honest with you. He is not the most utilized camper, but I want him to be utilized more in the show. And I think that his death does very much affect me, which is why he is in A tier. Similarly, Selena's death also affects me very much. That is why she has made it up into A tier as well. And of course, you guys know I've explained why she's up here and not closer to where Ethan is. You guys get that by now. Then we have Hermes, who I think is probably one of the more complex gods out of the bunch. Everything about him and Luke and their relationship I think is fascinating, and I can't wait for the show to like double down on all of that. And then at the top of A tier, we have Rachel Elizabeth Dare. I think that she is so cool. I think that she's very fascinating. I like the dynamic that she brings to the books. I like what she switches up in the books. She keeps us on our toes for a little bit, and I really like that about her. Now, moving on up into S tier, the best characters of Percy Jackson, in my opinion. At the bottom of S tier, we have Chiron. I mean, come on, he's just kind of the best. He is the voice of reason amongst all the demigods, and he plays a very important role in pretty much all of the books. Then we've got Grover, and I feel very bad having one of the main trio characters this far down in S tier, but a lot of the characters above him, I think, are just above him because of personal opinion. If you're in S tier, it's still a very high compliment and a very high praise to you as a character in general. I like Grover a lot. I think that he is a very good character. He does have annoying tendencies, in my opinion, but again, I think the show is handling him a lot better than the books did, so I think that that's a good thing. Then we have Tyson, and like I said, if I was doing a personal tier list, Tyson would probably be in like the second or third spot because I adore Tyson deeply, deeply. But since I'm trying to be like half subjective, half objective in this tier list, he's down here. Then we have Thalia Grace. I think that she is easily one of the coolest demigods in the entire book series. She is so fascinating. Her character dynamic with Annabeth, her dynamic with Luke, her dynamic with Percy. She is so interesting. I love her. Then we've got Nico D'Angelo, one of the more fascinating characters, I think, in the book series as well. All the way from him being a child of Hades to seeing his powers unfold to seeing him with his dad and all of that stuff. His very compelling story with his sister and his sister dying. I adore Nico. Then in our top 3 spots, in third place, we've got Luke. Of course, you know, I love a good antagonist. I think that he is a really, really well-written antagonist. I've already said a lot on Luke. You guys know why he's up in the top 3. Same thing with Annabeth. I've already said plenty about her. It's a no-brainer. She's Annabeth Chase. She's gonna be at the top of S tier. Same thing with Percy Jackson. Absolute no-brainers for those top 2 places, I think. Like, basic picks, yeah, sure, but they are the main characters for a reason. Like, they're just that good. And then you put them together, you put them in a relationship, and they become even better. And I love them. So that is my character tier list for the entire original Percy Jackson book series. Eventually, I will do one of these when I finish all of the Heroes of Olympus books. Guys, I've been filming for almost 2 hours. Plus, if I did every single character, guys, we'd be here for like 2 hours. I have no idea how long this YouTube video is going to be, but unfortunately the raw footage as of right now is like 1 hour and 45 minutes. So let me know what you think of my tier list, but be nice about it, okay? We can have different opinions, but we can still be nice and we can still be respectful to each other. I am sorry if I have deeply offended you by putting one of your favorite characters in a very low tier or putting a character that you dislike in a very high tier, okay? Let me know what you would change about my tier list, or let me know if you think I did a pretty decent job. I hope you guys enjoy when I do tier list videos. I enjoy filming them. It's a really nice way for me to be able to like yap and just kind of talk off the top of my head instead of having like a normally very formal and scripted YouTube video. I find them to be very fun videos, so I hope you guys do enjoy them. Like I mentioned, I am in the process of reading Heroes of Olympus, and if you want to get updates on my reading vlogs, the best place for you to go is my Patreon. Reading vlogs take a very long time to film. They take a very long time to edit. They're very time consuming. And I do post weekly updates on my Patreon whenever I get to sit down and read and film myself reading Son of Neptune. Patreon is the first to get an update for that. So make sure you go and check that out if you're super interested in getting updates faster instead of having to wait months for the YouTube video. But that pretty much does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.